Good evening, everybody. Again, thank you all for coming out tonight. What a great turnout. We had such a wonderful turnout on Monday night. Sometimes, the third night doesn't get as many as we had on the first night, but tonight I think y'all beat Monday night. So congratulations to yourself for beating it. This is awesome. We are so excited to be able to unveil the ideas and recommendations that we have after spending a couple of days here meeting with a lot of you. Before we get started, I want to kind of reintroduce our resource team. If you were here Monday night, you heard them kind of introduce themselves to you, and if you've been to any of our stakeholder meetings, then you've got to know them personally. But we've got Randy Wilson with Community Design Solutions, Kim Foster with Foster Relations, Jennifer Prather with Mississippi Main Street, Jean Zieren also with Mississippi Main Street. We've got Holly Hawkins with Belinda Stewart Architects, Chance McDavid with MBA's Asset Development Division, and Rachel Carter with MSU Extension. And I'm Thomas Gregory. I'm with Mississippi Main Street as well. The crew that you look at here, we have had an awesome time getting to know the community and really hearing all of the excitement that y'all have from Nettleton and the ideas that you've put forward. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the Main Street approach, because this is a national model that Main Street organizations use. This is not something that we've come up with on our own, but this is something that over 1,600 Main Street communities across the nation use as a model for economic and community development. And it's important, for me to kind of give you all a high-level overview of the Main Street approach, because this is how we're going to be presenting our recommendations to y'all, but also how the community can organize itself to get these recommendations done, to affect change in your community. In fact, as we go through the recommendations tonight, I want y'all to be kind of thinking of those in terms of these categories, because what we're going to ask you to do, if you feel so inclined, is on your way out the door tonight, you can see by the door, we've got two pieces of paper that have these 4 points listed there. If you see something or hear something tonight that says, hey, I'd like to be a part of that, or I would really like to volunteer to be involved with Main Street in the promotion category, we want you to print your name underneath that point so that Dana and her board will know that you might be interested in being a part of this change. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But I want to give you a high-level overview of each of these 4 points, and then we're going to get into some of the specific recommendations that fall into these categories. So organization is the first one we're going to talk about tonight. And you can see that that's all about building local leadership and strong organizational capacity. That's your formal Main Street organization and the board and the committee structure that falls underneath it. It's also about ensuring community engagement, which is exactly what we've done over the past couple of days. And we want to make sure that when our team leaves tonight, that community engagement does not stop, right? That this is the beginning of ongoing community engagement. It's also about creating partnerships across sectors. So, different organizations that we have representatives here tonight, it's important to build those strong partnerships so that Main Street is not working, kind of in a silo, trying to do this all by itself. Economic vitality is all about building a diverse economic base, catalyzing new investment in the community, and cultivating a strong ecosystem of entrepreneurship. We want Nettleton to be the easiest place in Northeast Mississippi to open a business. And so it's about creating a system of giving people the tools that they need to be able to do that. Promotion is about marketing a district's assets. Main Street is an asset-based approach, and Nettleton not only has a lot of really wonderful assets on which to build. Our team has definitely seen that over the past couple of days. It's all about communicating your unique features through storytelling. Nettleton's got a lot of wonderful stories. We want y'all to be able to tell that story confidently in a way that attracts people to the community. And then it's about supporting local, buying local. We've heard that repeatedly over the past couple of days that Nettleton needs to and should and can and will support its own businesses. That's so important, especially in the days of internet shopping and that sort of thing. Buying local is key. And then finally, design is about creating an inviting, inclusive atmosphere. It's kind of the physical things when you walk down Main Street, the things that you see with your eyes. It's the historic character. And it's also about creating people-centered places. We're going to be sharing a lot of really good ideas around these 4 points, but be thinking about them as we reveal those tonight, and be thinking about if you might be interested in signing up to be a part of this. All right, so mentioned this on Monday night, and I think it's so important that our process is people-focused, right? This plan, this process is done by Nettleton and for Nettleton. So this is a process that is reflective of the vision that you all have shared with us over the past couple of days. This is a photo of one of our stakeholder meetings. I think this is the steering committee meeting where we had a really good time kind of getting to know the folks in the community who are already working on this and who are going to be those that are going to carry this plan forward. Another photo from the other night where we asked y'all to prioritize the things that are important to you, the things that you feel are most important. I know that's probably something you're interested in seeing kind of what rose to the top. It's interesting when we do this in communities, it is often true, and it was true for Nettleton, that there's a clear winner in these categories. It seems like the things that bubble to the top, it's not even close. So for Nettleton, what you identified the other night as Nettleton's strengths are its intact historic district, the downtown area. The fact that you have an intact business district of historic assets is something that you all said, hey, this is important to us. And we agree. And, something I think you'll learn from this is that what we learned from this process and what you told us the other night has directly informed the recommendations that we are going to be providing back to you. You also, I love somebody who positioned what can sometimes be seen as a weakness, an empty building, but it presents opportunity, right? This is, in a way, a strength that you've got a blank slate to work with for new businesses and new development opportunities. So empty buildings do present an opportunity for Nettleton. Of course, there is no community anywhere that does not have some weaknesses, and it's important to recognize those so we can develop strategies to work through them. Nettleton does have some rundown building, it does have some vacant buildings, but I do like to think of that not as necessarily only a weakness, because there is opportunity built into that. Another thing we asked y'all to tell us is, what are some of the things that you would like to see improved? The clear 2 winners were the restoration of historic buildings. We've got some strategies to share with y'all for that. And Memorial Park, or Gazebo Park downtown, is a really wonderful space that I think the community would like to see activated and programmed so that it becomes a real true community asset. Goods and services, the things that y'all said we need, is a destination restaurant, a place that people will drive to Nettleton for, as well as an entertainment venue. Attractions and activities, you said, hey, we need more seasonal festivals, not just the Town Creek Festival, which is wonderful, by the way, but things that happen kind of on an ongoing basis with the different seasons. So there's some ideas around that, as well as, entertainment at night. We want something to be able to do at night and on the weekends. And then, of course, the sports complex was something that you all thought was important. So I go back to this Main Street approach slide because we're about to start breaking down the recommendations in each of the 4 categories. At the very bottom of this, you can see 3 words that I think define the Main Street approach and the process of implementation. Main Street is intentional, and so it's being very specific about the projects that you undertake and taking them on in a prioritized order. And that's something that we want to make sure you are aware of. It's collaborative, so it takes everybody coming together to collaborate to get these things done. This is not just Dana's job or the Main Street Board's job. It really belongs to the entire community. If you are sitting in this room tonight, you have a role to play. I see some high school students over here. Y'all have a very important role to play in implementing the Main Street approach in Nettleton. We've got all generations of folks. This is a collaborative effort. And it's also incremental. I think a lot of times communities come out with huge comprehensive plans that go right over the heads of the people. It's so bold, it's so visionary that you can't possibly even decide where to start to get it done. Main Street is about taking small projects one at a time and having small win after small win after small win over a period of time, whereas after 10 years you look back and you've been able to get all sorts of things done, accomplished. It's kind of the whole adage about how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. Well, that's kind of the Main Street approach. It's about an incremental day-by-day, month-by-month approach to implementing this process. All right, so let's get into it, shall we? So we're going to talk about organization first, and organization really is the foundation upon which the other things, promotion, design, economic vitality, get done. It is the framework behind which a Main Street organization runs. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. There we go. See, I went too fast. 1 second. There we go. Not going to spend a whole lot of time, but I want the community to be aware of, like, typically this is how a Main Street program is structured. You've got a typical board of directors that hires an executive director to do the day-to-day process, but they are supported by committees which are founded on these 4 points. And this is where the community comes in. One of the things I told Dana, I said, make sure you take the names that are put on the boards tonight on their way out, because those are people who could potentially make one of the committee members. So, beware of kind of what you're signing up for. We hope that you are excited about what you see and that you would want to sign up to be a member of one of these committees, because this is where the work gets done. This stuff does not happen magically. It takes a concerted effort. There's going to be multiple opportunities for engagement after the plan is delivered. There's board meetings if you're a board member, there's committee meetings if you're a committee member. One of the things we think is really important is setting up a quarterly schedule of community roundtable discussions, and that's with organizations like the city and the county, the Economic Development Foundations and the 2 counties, Main Street, of course, the public school district. So having the key partners in the community come together on a regular basis to talk about the issues that they're dealing with and see how they might be able to help and support one another. Oftentimes, when you get a group like that together, you find that the problem that one organization is having, maybe the other organization at the table has a solution for that. So communication is a key part of all of this. And again, you can see, we're asking for signups tonight. But the annual meeting is a great way for a Main Street organization to share with the community what's going on, as well as the festivals and events. And then volunteering is a wonderful way to get engaged in Main Street. One of the things that we found, I think that kind of rose to the top as a significant finding in these discussions that we've had, a couple of things actually. Well, there's things that need to be done in Nettleton. We heard a whole kind of list of things that, need to be done, right? We also found that there's people in Nettleton that are willing to volunteer their time to do those things, as well as to donate funds that are needed for these specific projects. But there seems to be a disconnect between the people that want to help and kind of knowing what the things are that need to be done and not sure if somebody else is already doing them or whose job it is to, say this needs to be done. Well, we found that Nettleton really needs an entity to take the lead on kind of bridging the people that want to engage and want to help, as well as kind of keeping that list of potential tasks and activities organized. And we feel like Main Street can be that leader and the person that brings that together. So our first recommendation is establishing really a movement and a strategy called Nettleton Now, right? We believe that now is the time to take matters into your own hands. And so this is a way of getting things done. The vision is for this to be project-driven, for it to be implementation-focused, with the participants that you see here. Main Street is the organizer, but with leaders from the city who have been very involved in this process, by the way. The mayor and the board have been in our meetings and have come out and really, I think, are looking forward to being a part of the change here in Nettleton. We also have a really good conversation with our faith-based leaders. And I think churches in Nettleton, as exhibited by the Methodist Church's willingness to host us tonight and on Monday night, they want to be engaged, and they've got church members and youth groups that are excited about being plugged into the future of Nettleton. Just takes a little bit of organization. And then we heard, some high school students came out to our arts and culture meeting the other day. They've got a lot of really wonderful ideas, and again, are willing to pull together to make this happen. So we think high school students really ought to be part of the implementation here. And so Main Street's role will be to serve as a clearinghouse for these ideas. If you've got something in the community that needs to be done, we want you to know that the person to email is Dana. And she'll keep and prioritize that list together with her committee and her board. And if someone says, hey, I've got a group that wants to take on a service project in Nettleton, it's Dana that would be the person that gets called and can assign those tasks. And then once those things are done, it is really important for a community and an organization to promote the success that comes out of that. Again, we've got some strategies for that as well. But this Nettleton Now idea is something that we think can be absolutely transformational for Nettleton. We've already got a lot of energy, a lot of good ideas, and it's about kind of pulling together and pulling in the same direction. So we're really excited to be able to share that with you tonight. Another thing that we saw that we were excited, you've got Nettleton Now. I meant to show these examples, which I forgot I had these slides. So the previous slide is an example of a task list from Allendale, South Carolina. This is just an example of how you can organize that list. And then we mentioned this earlier, but there's an application called MeisterTask. It's free. It's a web-based application that the Main Street organization will be able to use to kind of keep track of these tasks and who's assigned to them and that sort of thing. So a really good opportunity for project management. Moving on to the next thing, which I was kind of blew my own cover, but Nettleton Next. Nettleton does not have a leadership development program for our young people in the community. One of the things we heard again from the high school students is there's no cultivation of the future leaders of Nettleton. In a small community like Nettleton, y'all's future is dependent on the next generation. And, hopefully, probably some of them will go off to college, but you want them to be able to come back and have a tie to the place. And so what we are recommending is not really a new strategy. A lot of organizations and communities have programs like this, but it's a leadership development program for our high school students, particularly the 10th and 11th graders. We're going to be able to provide Main Street with more specifics about how to implement this. I know Industry Extension has a program that they often work with organizations to do leadership development. But teaching our high school students about things such as leadership and local government, team building and problem solving, helping them develop job skills, and teaching them what it means to be a part of community development. These are all things that I think our young people are interested in and would step forward and want to participate in. They also kind of would help serve as ambassadors for the city. So, some of these ideas and projects that need volunteers from a service perspective, the Nettleton Next program would serve as volunteers for that. There we go. Sorry. Third recommendation under organization is for Nettleton to become a certified local government. Put this photo up here because it's a photo that we took of the improvements suggestions. Y'all came up with a list of improvements you wanted to see in your community, and then you voted with these dots. And you can see the one that overwhelmingly got the most votes. It was restoration of historic buildings. There's a lot of financial incentives that are available for the redevelopment of historic property. And becoming a certified local government is an avenue towards having these resources at your disposal. I'm going to show you a little case study in just a second. But one of the main financial incentives that developers in Mississippi use to redevelop older buildings is historic tax credits. In order to have those in your community, or in order to access those, you have to have a historic district. And there's a process by which you have to go through that. So we want to encourage Nettleton to consider becoming a certified local government, establishing a downtown historic district, so that developers, some of y'all who are in this room tonight that own buildings downtown that may want to invest in the community, have access to these financial incentives and help close the gap of what it takes to make a return on your investment in Nettleton. Becoming a certified local government, also known as a CLG, also helps preserve Nettleton's unique architectural history for future generations. Y'all talked about having an intact historic downtown and having architecture that is uniquely Nettleton. It's not Shannon or Tupelo or Amory, it's Nettleton. And you have that because it's been preserved so far. So we want to make sure that the community is doing everything that it can to preserve Nettleton's historic architecture for these high school students and those that are Nettleton's future. I think some folks in the community have talked about other towns in the vicinity who once had historic downtowns that are no longer, and what a shame that is. We do not want that for Nettleton. So we want to do everything that we can to preserve downtown Nettleton. It's also a safeguard for property owners who invest in the community. The process is actually very simple. There is a local ordinance that gets passed, and it's something that we will work with the mayor and the board to work through what makes the most sense for Nettleton. We establish a historic preservation commission. You conduct a historic resources survey, and then there's a nomination to the National Register for a downtown Nettleton historic district. These are all details that we will come back and work with the Main Street program to make sure that the process runs smoothly. But I think this, of all things, is the best tool that is currently not in your tool belt in terms of being able to accomplish the things that you all have told us you want Nettleton to be able to accomplish from a historic preservation standpoint. This is a quick case study. I want to be very clear, this is a fake kind of back of the envelope calculation, but I just wanted to show y'all kind of the impact that historic tax credits can have for someone who might be interested in redeveloping a piece of property in your downtown. Scenario A at the top is a case study without the historic tax credits. You've got acquisition costs and renovation costs, and you just add those two together and that's your total cost. But if you have historic tax credits, you're able to reduce your total cost. You've got the acquisition and renovation cost, which stays the same. Oftentimes when you involve historic tax credits, there are some professional fees that involve you. Typically, you probably hire an architect like Holly to help you with the process. So there's a little bit of an additional fee there. So you can see the subtotal is actually more than the total cost without historic tax credit. But with the historic tax credits of 45%, you actually take that off the total cost. So your total cost ends up being not $150,000, but $103,000. Again, just an illustration of how important these historic tax credits are to communities like Nettleton who have some momentum in historic preservation. Not to bore you with the statistics and the numbers, but these things are really powerful in being able to bring about change in a downtown area. All right, the last thing that I'm going to talk about today is how important it is to celebrate your community's success. We see really two opportunities for Nettleton to be able to do this. So it's not enough to just quietly go out and do the things, although that's important. We want to be able to celebrate the people who get involved and help bring about this change that we are proposing. So one of the things we're recommending is creating a Pride of Nettleton campaign, right? This is something that you can do monthly or regularly. It could be every other month, however often it is warranted. But you want to recognize property improvements. Here's a gentleman who's painting a building on a mural on the side of the library downtown. New businesses that get opened, volunteer efforts that go above and beyond. Any local achievement that happens in Nettleton, we want to make sure and properly celebrate that. You can do that by coordinating with your newspaper to make sure that they recognize folks. Through social media, that's an easy thing. Even having like a sign that you put on site that says, Pride of Nettleton Award, kind of like Yard of the Month. But any way that you can celebrate local success kind of on an ongoing basis is really important to capitalize on that momentum and keep the ball moving forward. And then most of our Main Street programs have an annual meeting, right? If their members are invited to come out and get an update on how the program is doing, we'll of course encourage Nettleton Main Street to do that as well. But it's also a really good time for them to give annual awards to successful things going on in the community. Things like, best new business or best facade renovation, best retail window display from the year, or volunteer of the year. So we want to help create a program that recognizes those successes in the community. And that brings us to our next topic, economic vitality, which Rachel and Chance are going to come speak about. Y'all bear with us, we've got lots of things to hold.
After all this, maybe I won't fall down. So. That's the problem. Okay, everybody, thank y'all so much for having me here this evening. Can y'all all hear me? My name is Rachel Carter, and I'm with Mississippi State University Extension. I'm housed in the Center for Government and Community Development, so y'all know where to find me if you have questions about this later and need more help. So glad to be here. I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world because I feel like it is my job to come to the towns of Mississippi and help you figure out how to make more money. I love making money, I also love spending money. You can ask my husband because I have horses and they are expensive. So I like to say we're going to figure out how your town can possibly make some more money. We did a survey, and thank y'all for filling that out. Those of you that did, we had an incredible sample size, over 107 people in your town filled out the survey, which is unheard of for a town this size. But this is just kind of a snapshot of what some of the questions and answers were. We asked you guys kind of, what did you think you needed in Nettleton? What types of businesses did you think needed to be here in this town? And we wanted to do that to see if it's kind of matched up with existing data, your sales tax leakage and things like that. But what we're seeing, you can clearly see, or maybe you can't clearly see it, but I'll tell you, restaurants was something that you guys really wanted to see. And it was kind of a mixed bag. When we talked to restaurant, you wanted, a lot of people said, I need more fast food in my town, and then other people said you wanted destination restaurants. We're going to kind of talk about that in a second. The other thing that people wanted was an entertainment venue, as Tom said before, and you also wanted boutiques, and I see McDonald's popped up there, and you just wanted to have options, you wanted clothing options, things like that. The other question that we asked was, what are the things that you like in your town? And the words that came up a lot were you like your downtown buildings, you like that your town is small, that it's convenient, you like the people, that it's friendly, and so those are just good positive responses about that. The next thing I want you to know is that we kind of just looked at the economics of the town surrounding you, and I'm not going to share with you all of the information that we pulled together, that'll be in the report, but just so you kind of have an idea of your economy compared to some of the communities around you, you have a median household income of a little over $41,000. And so you're higher than some of the communities around you, but you're also lower than some of the communities around you. So for those of you wanting to start small businesses and things, keep that in mind. I did an analysis called a trade area analysis, and basically what that does is many times a small town doesn't stop at the city limits. You have a community that extends beyond that, and the trade area analysis basically tells you where people are most likely to shop, because just in general, people tend to shop in bigger towns versus smaller towns, and this tells you how far people will be willing to drive to shop in your town versus the towns surrounding. So what we have is the chart shows how far people would drive from Nettleton to how far the trade area extends from Nettleton in the opposite direction. So if somebody lives in between Nettleton and Shannon, and they live 3 miles from Nettleton, they're more likely to go to Shannon to shop than to Nettleton. That's just what the model tells us. Now y'all may tell me, no, nobody's going to Shannon, we don't like those folks over there, and that's fine. But this just kind of gives you an idea of what goes on with that. In Oklahoma, if you live, further than 6 miles from Nettleton towards Oklahoma direction, it's saying that if you have the same options for shopping, you may choose Oklahoma versus Nettleton. So, when I'm running all these numbers I'm going to show you next, we're showing this in regards to your trade area. When you say that you have a population of 7,000 and y'all start laughing, that's your trade area population. That's the people that live all in the middle, because we got to catch their spending power. We want to bring those people to your town. This is just a chart that shows you where you're losing dollars in Nettleton. There was a lot of leakage in a ton of different categories, but these were kind of the top picks that really jumped out at me to where I really thought that the existing data and the analysis that I did was spot on. It shows that you're leaking over $9 million in building and garden supply. Now, I'm saying that to say you may want to throw that number out, because since all this data was available to me, like you guys have had a hardware store open up, because they don't run this data every 6 months. So we're going to have to do some more exploration to see if you need to maybe spend some more money at the hardware store, or if it's doing really well, because I don't know the answer to that question. But The next thing to think about are department stores. Of course, you're leaking dollars in department stores because you don't have a department store. But what that $4 million shows you is the spending power and the willingness of people to spend dollars at department stores. That's what you guys are spending at Belk and places like that you're not spending in Nettleton. The next thing, you're leaking about $3 million in gasoline stations. You are leaking $2.6 million in restaurant sales within about 5 miles of the city limit of the city of downtown Nettleton. When you look at your secondary trade area, which goes out about 10 miles, you're leaking about $13 million. So that's the potential without having to bring in what we would call tourists for that destination restaurant. You're leaking anywhere from $2 to $13 million. $2 million in that initial trade area, which that would be fairly easy to capture. The $13 million in a 10 mile, which would be a little tougher to grab. The other things I want to point out to you, you're leaking about $2 million in food and beverage stores, $3 million in grocery sales, and then you're leaking 1.8, almost 1.9 million in clothing type sales, and those are men's and women's. To kind of see an accurate picture of what the existing data was telling us and what their tax revenues were telling us, we did a survey, and as I told you before, but this was another question. We wanted to find out where everybody shopped. And I know you guys cannot see this, and I'll be happy to send anybody the slide that wants it after the fact, but one thing I wanted to show that really jumped out is we asked where you're shopping for different things, and you guys are going to Tupelo a lot. You're going to some of the other towns too, but really the orange lines is showing the number of people, the percentage of people that are going to Tupelo to buy goods and services versus the number of people that are buying both goods and services here in Nettleton. Now, some of those services might not be available though, and I want to point out that everybody is going to a surrounding town for eye care and eyeglasses and things like that, and because there's not an eye clinic here that I know about that I've seen. All the existing data and also looking around on the internet, we haven't found an eye clinic, but you're above the national average for spending on optometry and eye care, but you're losing 100% of those potential dollars. So I wanted to point that out to y'all. But the overall thing to look at here is that you are losing a lot of dollars shopping to Tupelo, and that's probably not telling you anything that you don't know. I also wanted just to kind of give you just a snapshot. This is kind of a tapestry segmentation, and what all that is just the Esri software system that I use that does a huge survey across the nation and asks people questions to kind of get a general idea of what people like and what they value and how they spend their money. Shows that you are 69% of the people that live here belong to the rural bypass category, and those are people who, a lot of you do not have children at home, you enjoy the outdoors, you enjoy fishing, you're going to be concerned about price. That's maybe more important to you than buying the latest brand name, and so I wanted to kind of let you guys know that just so you kind of have an idea of what your market might look like. The other thing I want to tell you, your trade area population is over 7,000, so that's 7,000 people you could be drawing into your downtown, but as you saw the chart before, a lot of those people are not shopping here. You have over 2,700 households in this category, and your average family size is 1.9 people, and the median age is 39.6. The reason I'm throwing out all those numbers is that kind of tells you how many people you got here, about how old they are. Those can be key telltale things to figure out what kinds of goods and services you need to provide. Okay, these are just some things that kind of jumped out at me that I thought was very interesting, that the Esri data gives us with market data. You are above the national average for eating at parties. You are over 100% above the national average for people that eat at Captain D's and Long John Silver. That really jumped out at me. So, y'all like fried fish, seafood? Just something interesting. CC's Pizza, which is not surprising because y'all are supporting the pizza place here. Sonic as well, you do have a local Sonic, so that makes sense. And then Waffle House. So those are some of y'all's favorite places to eat. So if I see any smiles and some nods, nobody likes Waffle House here? Okay. Okay. The thing I also wanted to point out that I thought was interesting was that you guys spent, within your 5-mile trade area, y'all spent almost $2 million in 2017 on your pets. So, if y'all love the outdoors, you love your dogs, dogs, you love your horses, all those kind of things. That makes sense. So, getting a picture of the customer that lives here in the Nettleton area, I hope so. Other thing I wanted to point out on this slide, and I know this is just a lot of random facts, but y'all have asked me 100 times since I've been here, can we have a fancy restaurant in Nettleton? And we're going to dig into that a little bit more. The answer is I don't know yet, but the average estimates is that last year, on average, people from your trade area spent, when they went out to a family restaurant, they spent from $31 to $50 for their whole family. So if you think that falls in line with the budget for a fancy restaurant for the local market, then it would work. But if it doesn't, you kind of think about if we want a fancy restaurant that we're going to go to maybe 2 or 3 times a year, you've got to figure out something that's going to be cool enough, it's going to bring people in, and it's going to be a tourist attraction if you're going to make that work. This picture up here, I could not decide, chance I couldn't decide what slide to put this on. I wanted y'all to think about that because of the Captain D's Long John Silver thing, and this thought just jumped into mind because I go to almost every town in the state. And Macomb, Mississippi has a restaurant called Mr. Whiskers. Have y'all ever been there? I love it. It used to be a family dining place that burned down, and so they reopened up, they upgraded a service station, and they put a Mr. Whiskers in there, and it's fried catfish, it's gumbo, it's seafood po' boys, it's fantastic. But a lot of what I see in small towns that works well is something like this. I'm not saying you need a Mr. Whiskers or another Be Quick, but when you take something you've already got and you upgrade it and you diversify your product, those things tend to work in rural areas. They do, especially if it's something that people like, and it's convenience because you can go and get your Cokes and, a few convenience items, and mom can grab supper, and it's not, just straight drive-through, because maybe they had that a couple times this week. It maybe is a little nicer than that, so just something to think about. Okay, now, what you really want to know, and I'm going to attempt to answer these questions with just these few words on the slide, but you've asked me a lot, as I said, about dining. And I'm going to show you something else on the next slide. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Clothing. If you want to open a clothing store, or you feel like your clothing stores are not making the money that you want them to make in this town, consider going to other towns that have a similar market to you and seeing what's working in those towns. Because you can have a fantastic clothing store, and you're not making the money that you want because maybe you're not selling the exact things that the people that you're there want. And I use and I promise I won't take a class, but this is just real quick. When I talk to business owners, I'll talk about my horse boarding business, and I used to be a barrel racer, but my horse, I paid a few $100s for her, and she's fat, and she's probably asleep right now, and she's in the pasture, and I have not fed her today, she's eating grass. My customers, so that I could make money in my horse business, and they had a whole different outlook on their horses. Their horses cost more than my truck. Some of them cost almost as much as my house. Their horses didn't hang out in the pasture and eat grass. They had oxygen supplements, they had vitamin supplements, they had fancy food, they had veterinarians come and see them every month. So I had to have my facility to the level that those people liked it. I was selling my product to them. I wasn't selling my product to myself because I could care less. I'm not going to pay, a trainer or any of those kind of things for my horse. So put that in perspective, okay? And you just need to do a little research, kind of figure out, are you meeting the market, you meet the demands of your client. I always ask people to picture, what is your ideal person? What does your ideal customer look like, act like, what do they like, what do they do? Other things that y'all have asked me to look at, I put that iconic up there thing, so I wanted y'all to really think about that. But, and also some towns to visit. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Think about going to South Carolina. They've got some businesses, they've got kind of a similar dynamic. Their income level's a little bit higher than you guys, but they've got some similar characteristics to their community. Pontotoc, Mississippi's got 3 or 4 boutiques that are good, from what I understand, are doing well. Their downtown's doing well. And then Marigold, Mississippi kind of captures on that niche market. Y'all have asked me that a couple of times. Is there something that we could do that nobody else does? I don't know that yet, but Marigold has several, they kind of have a niche for pottery. So that's kind of a town, if you want to say how a town does something on a niche market that's a very small town, Marigold, Mississippi does that. The other questions y'all have asked me is about a housing study, because I think there has been maybe potential housing issues, maybe you don't have enough housing. That is a question we could probably get to an answer to for you, or at least give you some insight on, but not in 2 days. That takes a while. So if y'all want more information about housing, do you have a housing shortage, things like that, please call me. I'll be happy to help. And then also the 50 acres that has been mentioned, what should be done with that. And sportsplex has been mentioned a few times. I've done a lot of studies on sportsplexes, but I didn't want to get into that tonight. So if you guys have interest in that, just give me a call at the Center for Government. We'll move right along. How am I almost done? Okay. Real quickly, what I want y'all to say is that the survey revealed that people who had a stronger attachment to the community and a stronger sense of place were much more likely to shop here for their necessity goods. I'm talking about hardware, grocery, things like that. But the people but not necessarily for the fun stuff like entertainment and clothing and trendy things like that. They were going other places, no matter how much they love their town. So you got to think about that. This is just a picture of the Spice Village in Waco, Texas. Y'all write that down, take a photo of that slide, whatever you want to do. If y'all are thinking about mixed-use retail, it's an excellent model just to look at. And this is just to let y'all know that there are some restaurant trends out there. The whole state of Mississippi has a gap in local food trend restaurants. We're getting more of those, but compared to other states, we really don't have that. And so that is something that could be explored.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Certainly a pleasure to be with you tonight. My name is Chance McDavid. I work for the Mississippi Development Authority's Asset Development Division, and that's really community development at MDA. That's what we do. Just a couple of slides, and you've seen some data tonight. You've seen some great information. What I wanted to do is try to close out with a couple of things that talks about how to create a small business ecosystem here in your community. Some things that you can do, as I believe Thomas said earlier this evening, how do you make it the easy as possible for Nettleton to be a real magnet for opening up businesses in Northeast Mississippi. So a couple of things I want to talk about. One of them, to streamline and simplify the process. And what I mean by that is really focusing in on how do people go about opening up businesses, how do they learn about resources, if there are permits and things like that that are needed to fill out in the city of Nettleton. How do you go about doing that? Where do you find that? Do people go to City Hall? Do they go to the library? Do they go to, you never know sometimes from town to town where people wind up and want to ask those questions. So please be, trying to think about ways to streamline that. Not necessarily just for, brick and mortar type businesses on Young Avenue or Main Street out here, but also home-based businesses, micro businesses, those kinds of things, online businesses. You still have that business potential. So what is the process in Nettleton, and are there ways to simplify and streamline that? Also, conduct a business asset inventory. Very, very important. You'd be amazed how many communities people will show up and walk into a community, just drive in and say, I like that building. I think I'm going to try to open a business here. I get a good vibe here. Let's start a business. But they have no idea where to start looking for who owns these buildings, what's the square footage of these buildings, what would the lease rates be, rental rates, if they're for sale, how much, where are the property owners, are they absentee landowners, property owners, are they here? So all of the things that a community can do to be proactive in terms of finding out, what is available and kind of having that inventory. That's a great proactive step that that communities, especially Main Streets, can take to get a handle on that information. And then also the second thing, create and embrace a culture that encourages small business success. Nettleton is a great community, but your business base, your economic base is about entrepreneurship. It's about small business development. Certainly you've got some larger industries here, but that's probably more the exception than the rule in a community like Nettleton. So you need to, again, streamline some of the resources available. Create a small business resource center somewhere in town. We can help you investigate where the logical place may be for that. But a one-stop shop where people can go in. If they've got an idea, like a concept plan, to completion, how do they receive that business planning assistance? All the way from an idea till they open up a brick and mortar or an online or a home-based business. So what are the resources available. We can help you guys pull those things together and help you with that. But also a focus on small business retention and expansion. So many times communities focus on bringing in outside businesses, whether they're large or small. They get here and then they forget about them. You don't want to forget about your existing economic base. So you think about how do we keep who we have and how do we make who we have even stronger and even better. So talking to these people, having roundtables, asking questions, and helping them with any needs that may arise. Also, training opportunities for existing businesses. There is a whole laundry list of training opportunities and resource providers out there across our state that can come in and help you guys with your small business needs. Things like online business review tools like Yelp, like TripAdvisor. How do you get on there? How do you claim your page? How do you respond to customers who are reviewing your business? Those things are critically important. We can teach you how to go online, how to claim your page, and how to keep that information updated. Websites and social media platforms, all of those things. How to build websites that won't break the bank. How to set up platforms in social media that won't totally, take all of your time. Show you key best practices. Again, lots of resources for you. Electronic commerce, mobile commerce. Guys, $1.7 trillion was spent in 2017 globally on retail, on electronic devices, tablets, smartphones. This year, $4 trillion spent globally on electronic devices. Mobile commerce, things like your smartphones and things like that, mobile devices, 53% of all e-commerce sales on mobile this year, or actually for next year, projected to be next year, so over half of all sales globally. Entirely critical that your small business has some sort of web presence. There are services that can help you there. And then finally, hospitality and customer service. Critical to any community's bottom line, because you've got to, people will spend more money. In fact, American Express said that we as customers will spend an average of 17% more money at a business for the same good or service if we receive an exceptional customer service experience. People are willing to spend more money. So hospitality and customer service, and you guys can learn how to differentiate yourselves by having exceptional customer service here in a small town. Thanks. Promotion.
Thank y'all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for your participation this week. I was blessed with the opportunity to work on the branding with Jennifer, and she'll be talking to you in just a minute, and try to get an image going for Nettleton, something that all your entities can use, whether it be Main Street, maybe the city can use it. It will integrate into your Town Creek Festival or some of these campaigns in which we've already mentioned tonight. To really get the feel to create the brand, we have to hear from you. And y'all were just incredible at doing that. And as Chance just said, hospitality helps sell things. Y'all got that. That's just absolutely a definite. Our team felt very, very welcome this week. To tell the story, y'all know it better than we do, by far. But to give you kind of a roadmap, we put this brand statement together. And I'll read it to you. It's a lot of words. You don't have to try to read it on here. Nestled in the plains of the Mississippi and poised as a gateway to the hills is Nettleton, Mississippi. For centuries, Nettleton has exuded a strong sense of community. Like loaded steamboats departing from Margo and circling the town by the shallow waters of Town Creek, to the rails of commerce through Monroe County, Nettleton's community has rallied together to foster success that past and present generations can be proud of. Its past is paved boldly by hometown heroes that include athletes, entertainers, and world-renowned medical professionals. Nettleton's residents have cultivated a strong culture of talent, drive, and creativity. A small town with a big heart, where young people are nurtured to dream and neighbors serve one another. Nettleton is a well-rounded community who has embraced its storied history, allowing it to come full circle to shape its future. Naturally, it's time to notice Nettleton. Notice our sons and daughters of the past. Notice our students with talent and drive. Notice our local business leaders with vision and commitment to growth. Notice our residents who give up time and resources to build a strong sense of place and open their doors to welcome visitors. Notice the inclusivity that creates connections and camaraderie, a unified commitment, and a vision of the community we want to be. The future is shaped right now. It's time to notice Nettleton. So with all the things that we heard, the community pride is there, and as our other team members said, it's just time to connect the dots. Y'all want to do the work, y'all want to bring Nettleton forward, and it's just time for y'all to notice it, for others to notice it, and know what needs to be done to make that happen. So we proposed the logo of Notice Nettleton. This starts with an internal campaign that can eventually be taken to an external audience when you look at tourism and things of that nature. But for now, we want to notice Nettleton. We want to celebrate your successes. Let me talk on the colors real briefly. The colors that we pulled, which you can also see here, complement what is existing in your downtown. We aren't suggesting to bring in totally new colors, but rather things that complement the buildings, the signage on the, what do we call it? The 4-lane, as we heard this week. So these things will complement what you already have, but also allow you to bring it more up to date. Also, the N itself can be used. We all know the Nike swoosh. We know things that are just a graphic, and you can use the N in that way when you don't want to use the Nettleton in full. Also, more importantly, the circle around the N, we just felt really helped to demonstrate how well-rounded Nettleton is, how y'all put your arms around each other. It goes deeper than just graphics and colors and fonts. But there's, and we even talked about too, the team did how Town Creek runs around Nettleton. So there's lots of ways and things that in the future you can spin off of this. These are the typefaces. As you can see at the top, the primary typeface is the one that we proposed for the Nettleton, and secondary is things that you can integrate, such as festivals, main streets in the city. These are just some spin-offs of it and ways that it can be used. Possibly, if you look in the middle, you can see integrating the festival, the city, and Main Street in multiple ways that it can be used. And with that, I'm going to bring Jennifer to talk about the campaigns. If you don't feel good after here tonight, I don't know what would make you feel good. And I get the opportunity to work in communities every day that I work at Mississippi Main Street to tell their stories and dig deeper into the communities and what is behind those stories. We all know that downtown is some of our most storied places, and the promotion is the fun part of that. We say that our downtown is the core of our community. It's the heart of your community, and if your heart is not strong, the rest of your community is not going to be strong. So what we have intended to do through this campaign that we have developed is really strengthen your heart. Really strengthen the heart of what makes this community tick. And what we heard time after time was that the merchants are strong, the students are absolutely phenomenal. I cannot tell you how impressive been as a student this week. But also the number of accomplishments that have happened in Nettleton that people don't know about. So while we can talk all day about bringing people to Nettleton from a tourism standpoint, and really promoting Nettleton as a destination, we really feel like we have to strengthen the core first. And so we've really focused on an internal promotional campaign that really is going to differentiate the difference in the knowledge of how your local community feels about you and the perception that that exudes. Because I can tell you right now that if you don't feel a certain way about Nettleton, Mississippi, the public externally is not going to feel that way either.
So we really feel that it's extremely important to begin a campaign that's going to share successes, share achievements, and share what Nettleton has right here, so that there is no opportunity to say, we didn't know we had that in Nettleton, Mississippi. So real quickly, the first thing that we have suggested is that you latch onto that hashtag Notice Nettleton. Notice Nettleton means look what we have right here in Nettleton, Mississippi. We are suggesting that you rotate through the Main Street Association a series of highlights. These can be used monthly, they can be used weekly, and again, continually using that hashtag of Notice Nettleton. Merchant and retail spotlights. This is extremely important. You have small business owners that are your neighbors that are working every day to provide what this community needs. And so why not share their information? Not only share it so that people externally see that it's here, but also we heard somebody say, we would like a hunting and fishing store here. And then later in another meeting we found out that there is someone that serves that market here. So this campaign is designed to internally make the community aware of what all the community has to offer. Student achievements. Again, over and over again, we were blown away by the quality of your students. We heard from the coaches and some of the school leadership, and with the school right in your backyard, we just feel like that is an asset to capitalize on. That is your future leaders. That is the next generation of Nettleton, Mississippi. So it's important to retain them and to get them excited about the community that they live in so that they want to either stay here or come back here. And again, it's Notice Nettleton. Promoting those achievements with that hashtag, and then celebrate accomplishments. We heard so much about the cast, about how there's Major League Baseball players, NFL players, actresses. The one I was probably most impressed with was that Kay McDuffie, who started the Mississippi in the Park, is from Nettleton, Mississippi. Those are the kind of stories that people that are in high school need to remember. They need to hear about that because they need to know where their past has led this community. And so constantly remembering those things, other successes and accomplishments that can be shared are the mural that's being done downtown, a new building that's being purchased and renovated. Those things are just pieces of your past that need to be restored. We're going to make a lot of recommendations for improvements, and Thomas said earlier, you've got to promote your successes. You've got to tell your story, because we did talk about the knowledge, but the public's perception of what Nettleton is going to be based on what they hear from you. And so you need to tell your story first. You need to share the successes that you have locally so that people have nothing better to do than know about all the good things that Nettleton has to offer. So we're proposing the Notice Nettleton campaign, and here's what that could look like. So if you notice on the right, that's exactly Pure Brew, who we have stimulated their economy by purchase of coffee all week while we've been here. Thank you, Zach. Notice Nettleton. This will be a little blurb about Zach and what his history is, and maybe why he and his wife wanted to open a coffee shop here. Maybe the philanthropies that they support locally. Again, just reiterating that message of small business support in the community. And then on the left, you'll see a picture of the beautiful fall decor that's done at City Hall. And asking Dana, she let me know that Ms. Janice and a few other volunteers did that. Again, celebrate the people who are doing the good work in your community. Tell those stories, because I guarantee you the general public just thinks those decorations are there. But we all know that they don't. So celebrate each other, encourage each other, and thank each other, but without putting it out there that they're doing it. Nobody has any way to know that. So we're looking to foster just this spirit of camaraderie and success locally, and that makes people feel good. You heard Rachel say that people who feel an attachment to a strong sense of place are more prone to save and spend their money. So that's the goal of this campaign, is to just foster that strong sense of pride in what Nettleton has here before we start to even build on that, so that when that pride is there, it will grow organically. And this is another recommendation. You heard Thomas talk about the Nettleton Now. What we foresee Nettleton Now being is a strategy-focused group of people who work to implement strategies of change in Nettleton. We call it Nettleton Now because we talk about celebrating history, celebrating the past, but there's so much work to be done here right now. We were so inspired by meeting with the faith-based community and meeting with the students, and I think Brother Cecil, you said, you were telling us about this big revival that was put on, and you said we rallied together for the cause. And that resonated with me, and I think 2 or 3 of us wrote it down because that's what communities do. They rally together for a cause that needs to be done. And so we talk about community work that needs to be done, and everyone thinks, oh, we need to get our funding up to do that, we need to get our funding up to get new landscape, we need to get our funding up to get new lighting. We might have a neighbor down the street who needs to do some work, and they're out of compliance, or out of ordinance of the city, and the city is potentially going to fine them. What better way to build camaraderie than to have a group of people that are willing to go to that person and say, hey, I know you've been struggling with this, and the city might have sent you a few letters. Let me help you do this. This is the group to do that. Nettleton Now. I was like really wanting an acronym for this, and so I looked at the Now and I said, to me that says notice our work. Notice what we're doing right now in Nettleton, Mississippi. So Nettleton Now will be actively made up of a group of people, whether it be a student ambassador group, the faith-based community, and it will be a comprehensive list of projects that are continually needing to be done. Now, we don't want it to be a Dunkin' Miracle project, so we really want to count on Dana to be the kind of keeper of that list and to vet that. And every project that's done will need to be, in tune with the mission of Main Street and that service to the community. But if we don't tell about these things, no one knows that their neighbors are doing this work. So we're suggesting, for instance, if someone does some work on landscaping in the park downtown, get a sandwich board sign and put, this park's being restored by Jonas Chapel. No offense, that's the person that came find. Celebrate who did that work so that when people walk by downtown, they know that their neighbors are the one doing this. And so it's exciting to see that there's manpower capability, and there's probably also some people that are willing to fund the project too that might not necessarily be able to do the work. And again, just to think through, this is a lot of graphics and a lot of collateral, if you will. Don't let that scare you. These are very easy pieces that can be formed as templates that can be dropped in and dropped out. We know that Dana is a one-person staff on Main Street right now and has a board, and oftentimes people think that it takes a certain skill set to do this kind of campaign and this kind of work. But don't be afraid of it, because that's where we come in, the technical services, to help you, to teach you how to drop this stuff in, and to make it manageable, so that we can just meet you where you're at, so that you have the confidence to run a campaign that we're proposing. So to move into more of the promotion and marketing, we talked a lot about events. We heard over and over again that we just need more to do. We just need more to do. We want events. We want people to think that our downtown is beautiful. We want people to look down there and turn and go, I need to turn down Main Street. Now, we've also had a lot of conversation about which comes first, the chicken and the egg situation. Do we have to have a Main Street with full storefronts, with restaurants, with retail, with the nail salon, with hair salons before that can happen? No, it doesn't. Because what can also happen is you create a strong sense of place where people congregate and they want to be, like the town watering hole. And if people like J.J. Burks, who put you on the spot, say, you know what, that's where I want to buy a building and open a business. There's something special in that town. So a couple of different things that we are suggesting here. One is the Nettleton Town Festival. I think when we were remiss, we didn't talk about this festival. It has a long history in Nettleton. And I've heard a lot about how over the years it's kind of ebbed and flowed with strengths and weaknesses. So the first thing that I think that we should do is come in and do an evaluation and analyze this festival. Come in and structure it to where there's a strong committee formation. We never want anything like this to fall on the backs of the same 4 or 5 people in the community. Because if that's the case, there's just no pride, there's no sense of accomplishment, and there's no sense of feeling like everyone is a part of it. So forming a committee and a sector of subcommittees will really help make a festival like this manageable. We want you to figure out what you're doing and what you do well and keep that where it's at. And over time, this will grow and grow and grow. And I encourage you not to be afraid to start small. This is not Angler, Mississippi, and your festival is not Robert Festival, but that's okay because you have qualities that will make you completely different and probably even more unique than that. So embrace those things and capitalize on them. And I would encourage you to revisit the 5K. I've heard that several times. 5Ks can be very good for revenue generators. Even though, obviously festivals do need to make a little bit of money because they're very time consuming, but keep in mind that not all events are about making money. Sometimes they're about offering someone an experience. that takes a hold of them and makes them want more of that, so they want to come back. The good thing about 5Ks is this is just a picture that I pulled, but you can see how a 5K offers a little bit of something for everybody. You know, I don't know a single demographic that doesn't participate in a 5K, whether it be a fun run, or a kid run, or a dog run, in some way. And so that really offers a draw for your community. People also travel all over the region to run 5Ks. Like, it's a cult thing. Like, I wish I could do it, but I can't. But I used to work for runners, and literally, they plan their weekends based on where their run's at. So I think it's worth us looking into that and see if we can capitalize on that. To bring that back. Also, something that we heard a lot is that you have a lot of talented people in the community. You have a lot of photography, you have a lot of art, you have some really talented students that might be looking for an avenue. So I think it's worth exploring, you know, if Town Creek Festival is an avenue for that, for art competitions, or starting to retain some art interest in children and things like that. And then the implementation of seasonal events. So this is where we really get into creating that experience, those special times downtown that even though all the storefronts might not be filled, that number one, you move people around town and you display and promote the local businesses that you have, even if they're non-retail merchants. And number two, you create a place where people want to be. So some examples that I've given here, I think it's a good idea to look at them seasonally, maybe do a Christmas event, that's low-hanging fruit that we can help you implement right away. And then also things like in the fall, the homecoming at the school. We heard a lot about how the homecoming parade used to go through downtown. Obviously, I know COVID has changed everything, but we will get back to normal times again, guys. We will find our new normal, and we will still figure out how to celebrate what we have as a community. And so bringing into implementation some seasonal events to create constant activity. What you see here with the Hernando Main Street sign, think about having Christmas decor competition with your merchants. That pulls in merchants who don't just sell retail goods. People that want to get involved, maybe a dentist that doesn't really know how to. That makes them feel part of everything. A cider competition. Well, don't laugh, everybody says everybody has a cider competition. But just something unique. You may not have a lot of restaurants downtown, so you might say, well, we can't have an event downtown. There's nothing for people to do. Capitalize on the people that you have in your community. Home-baked good vendors, cottage food vendors, food trucks. I know that sounds scary. I got a lot of feedback yesterday about how we don't know how to navigate transient vendor laws or food trucks, or the Department of Revenue having to collect sales tax, which, by the way, is super important. So if you decide to have an event and people raise money, call me, because you need to be retaining that sales tax here in Nettleton, Mississippi. So those events not only stimulate your economy, but they're offering a place for people to have a great experience. Don't forget that the person who moves to Nettleton, or the person who opens a business in Nettleton, is always a visitor first. Always. Even if it's just a pit stop. And so that's where your hospitality comes into play. You only have one chance to make a first impression. And there are so many ways to make a good first impression. So here's some more ideas, seasonal events that you can do. Pop-up music, I'm not going to go back because it takes too long. Pop-up music, I'm sure that you have people who play the guitar, people who sing, maybe people who would be willing to carol at Christmas. Just something to create activity downtown. This is something that we just kind of came up with as like a mock advertisement. For instance, Nights on Nettleton Main Street. First of all, it proudly claims that Nettleton Main Street is putting this event together, but it's something that people can look forward to. So Young Street from 7 to 10, food trucks, music, art, and craft vendors. Even if you just had a couple of food trucks and some music, people would come there and they would be glad to be rubbing elbows with their neighbor. That's where people catch up, that's where people do life together. And so this is something that I look forward to working with Dana to see if we can help you guys implement. Okay, let me go back one more. So that's like the short-term kind of internal promotion that we're recommending. There is one long-term recommendation that we as a team are making. I'm not even sure I could also read under. We see a vital asset in the Town Creek. We heard over and over again how Town Creek was such a method of commerce for the community in past days. And we know that just as close as Amory, people use Town Creek to kayak. I cannot begin to speak to the viability of using Town Creek as a recreational asset, but we think it's worth exploring. So we would like to work with you guys to find some funding opportunities, maybe to do some research through grants, and also figure out the pulse of the local community, just to determine whether or not Town Creek would be vital to a recreational opportunity. There's people that travel to Tennessee, Alabama, and Arkansas to do recreation on rivers and creeks, and if you can capitalize on that and draw some of those people here, that could be a really big opportunity for Nettleton. I think that's all that I have. One thing I would like to add is, as we begin to build these promotional events in this campaign, and we're strengthening the relationship with our merchants that we're leaning on to make this place important and vibrant, and to be the hospitality generator of our community, it's vital that you guys form a merchants roundtable and that you meet regularly. Become aware of each other. Know what each other sells, know who you are, know where you're located, communicate with each other. Retailers are not necessarily competition for each other. A boutique is not competition for the boutique down the street. You know, they say that the rising tide floats the boat. And the more that we can do to strengthen your retail community, the more you'll be able to draw people in and keep people here to shop. Thank you guys.
So we're down to only 2 more hours, so we're doing good. No, you've been a very patient audience, so let's do this. Let's do a little bit of crowd participation so you can illustrate the Main Street approach to design. I want you to turn and look at somebody closest to you but remain social distance. Look at them straight in the face and repeat after me. You gotta find somebody, look at them. Everybody ready? I'm so glad you don't look like me. Okay. You just illustrated the Main Street approach to design. I'm so glad that Nettleton, Mississippi doesn't look like any other place on the planet, right? Amen? We're in church, you can say amen, it's all right. Because it is precisely your unique calling card. I can see your fast food restaurants in numerous towns all across America, but the assemblage of historic buildings that you have in downtown Nettleton exists in one place on the planet, and it's right here in Nettleton, Mississippi. And that's precisely why you had a hint, a strong hint, that we need to absolutely preserve and enhance those buildings as much as possible. You had so many recommendations and thoughts about design that I decided to break them up into 3 categories: short, medium, and long term, so that you aren't overwhelmed. In terms of short term, we want to start at the very basics, but with a nuance. I think, community pride and community cleanup campaigns are a dime a dozen. But here, the thing that we want to make it unique and distinguish it is on a regular basis as you conduct these community cleanups, do them on a topical basis. In other words, don't do the same thing every time, because not all of us like to pull weeds. Can we get an amen then? But some of us love to paint. Shockingly, I do. And so make sure, whether it's 1 month you clear out old appliances, 1 month you do painting, 1 month you do yard work, just keep it diverse so that people don't get bored. And if you're going to celebrate that, give them a good t-shirt. Give them something with this. Did y'all love that outstanding logo design they just came up with? Make sure it's featured that. You're going to know what I'm talking about. Those car wash t-shirts you get? The ones that have 92 logos that are so ugly, the only thing you do is wash your car or clean it? Don't give people that kind of shirt. If they're going to sacrifice time to help clean up the community, give them a really good t-shirt to celebrate it. Number 2, the most important word on that slide is temporary. What we heard is we've got a lot of vacant buildings. And anytime a place has a lot of vacant buildings, it can send out a perception. You can tolerate 1 or 2, but if you get a lot of vacant buildings, then people can wrongly conclude that downtown is bad for business. It may not be the case at all. So one of the strategies that we can employ to kind of take that visual edge off of a vacant building is doing temporary vacant building treatments. One of the most obvious is putting art in the windows. Right over here we've got Blake and Emma. I'm going to have you stand up. These guys are really phenomenal artists. put local artists work in these windows, and all of a sudden you have sort of a pop-up gallery, and I guarantee you, your family and your friends will come see it. In Anniston, Alabama, that's exactly what they did. They had an empty plane, put up a couple of posters, and instantly it became a pop-up art gallery. Another thing you can do, and Philip, I know we talked about this, is you should take historic photographs, print them on butcher paper, or take them up in the window, and all of a sudden people are so drawn to these historic photos of nostalgia that they don't even focus on the fact that this building is vacant. And as I noted, Philip has this fabulous website on Facebook called Nettleton Historical Images, and we call it, where's Zach? We saw Zach's cute mug. So imagine putting those up in the windows to just remind people about the historic places and people and events that have occurred in downtown Nettleton. And all of a sudden, what once before was an eyesore now becomes sort of this temporary pop-up museum. But do we want those buildings to be that way forever? The answer is no. Again, these are temporary gestures, but they're good ones. In Arkadelphia, Arkansas, we had a really tough situation. This building was completely occupied, and it was occupied by a pharmaceutical company that made, produced, and packaged drugs. Can we understand why you wouldn't want people to see inside? But as a result, it made the downtown feel dead, and it looked empty. The solution here is what we do on cars. We just put vinyl clings using historic colored photo postcards, and again, it kind of converted this dead space in these blank windows into sort of an outdoor museum. And here you can see the idea that Jennifer and Kim came up with those Notice Nettleton posters and celebrating Pride. This is Conway, South Carolina, where we used 11 by 17 posters. You can print them off on your home color laserjet printer. And we just celebrated stories about people. Why do they love this place? Why do they call it home? Why do they educate their kids there? Why do they choose to invest? And all of a sudden, you're so drawn to reading these stories about your friends and your neighbors, the parents that your kids go to school with, the people that you go to church with, that you don't even notice that the building is empty. So those are just some quick strategies to employ in the meantime until we occupy those buildings with vibrant, sustainable businesses. Speaking of vibrancy, if there's anything we heard over and over and over again, it's on our downtown. We want there to be things for people to do, and we want it to look alive and vibrant. And one of the key solutions is a technique we call vibrancy amenities. These insertions of color and interactivity that can be achieved at far less money than expensive facade renovations and streetscape projects. And so whether it's colorful bistro tables and chairs, flower pot, flower baskets, it's amazing to me. Have y'all noticed that the towns that you tend to love and you think really have a high quality, they almost always feature well-maintained flowers? I don't know what it is about it. It's just a standard of care gesture. And sometimes people say, we don't have enough room on our sidewalks to put bistro tables and chairs. This is Kent, Michigan. You can see it takes up not very much. These are the kind that fold up against the side of the building. It takes up about 18 inches. But the amount of color and interest that it creates with just those 3 umbrellas is you can just kind of bring your sidewalks alive. Just populate your public spaces, your sidewalks with all of these games and interactivity. It is amazing to me the mileage you can get from a simple game of cornhole, right? Or giant Jenga or bocce. You've got these green spaces in downtown. Let's make sure they're filled with opportunities for interactivity. Now, I obviously need to put a necessary plug and caveat. In the age of COVID, we may need to hold off for just a little while because you don't know who touched the cornhole bag before you. But once we're past COVID, again, this is just a strategy that we can employ to just interject color and vitality and activation for far less money than other gestures. That lady right there is my neighbor. Eileen Blythe, she's an artist. She took propane tanks, welded them together, and they become this musical instrument that when you sit on this bench in our downtown, you can play it with your friends. Good luck trying to sit on one of those on a Friday night in downtown Columbia. It is just going to always be occupied. Populate your downtown with as much public art as you can afford. I mean, it's just a demonstrable point that communities that invest and install public art, they tend to have a higher than average economic development quotient. Isn't it amazing how you can convert a cheap chain link fence into a piece of art? Just populate your downtown with all these things. In the little town that I work in, Lake City, South Carolina, population a whopping 7,000. We took high school students in our art department, combined them with the local VOTEC school, and we created 9 4x8 sheets of plywood, converting them to custom, portable, miniature golf holes. Each one has, as you can see, has a different technique, different style, and when we assemble them all together in this little pocket park where regrettably a building burned down, all of a sudden we have a pop-up miniature golf course. What did we hear the other night? We need things to do. There's nothing to do downtown. I'm telling you, for a couple $100, you can create a lot of excitement and activity and places and things for your kids to do in that way. In terms of medium-term recommendations, these are the things that are going to be a little bit more difficult, but they're going to bring greater rewards. One of the things that is number 1 on your list is we want to see the downtown memorial or gazebo park enhanced. When it comes to your downtown green spaces, there are certain principles, and I'm a little nervous because Shane right here is a trained landscape architect. I'm just a regular building architect, so I'm a fish out of water right now, but based on my experience, there's some best practices when it comes to downtown open and green spaces. And the first one is just flexibility. If you design a space to only do one thing, you have limited the amount of people and activities that can enjoy that space. So build flexibility in all of your green spaces. Make sure it's comfortable. And I don't just mean reclining and leisure, but I also mean you only feel comfortable in spaces that you feel safe in. So make sure they're well lit. Make sure there are eyes to the park and eyes out of the park. But the most important thing, frankly, is don't forget to program them. You know, we develop these green spaces and we forget to put people inside of them. And whether it's a pop-up yoga class or, you know, people creating a little outdoor concert, you know, not every festival has to be a big one. You know, make sure you're thinking about the 4-string quartet from the high school that can come and play downtown. If you got local musicians, put them in the park, you know, one evening on the weekend. Program those spaces. I want to illustrate it again from the little town in Lake City. This, regrettably, is where our theater burned, which, if memory serves me correctly, that's how your memorial park was created as well, correct? The theater burned there. And so the park that was there before Andy Kalbach and I redesigned it, and you'll hear about Andy in just a moment. This is what it looked like, and you can tell it's not offensive. It doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination, but if you think about the best practices I just told you, it kind of violates every one of them. You know, you can't move a single stick of that furniture. It's all bolted into the floor. You really are limited in your options of how you're going to enjoy that park because of the surfaces. And so when we redesigned it, we decided to give people maximum options and maximum flexibility. If you like walking on concrete, you can walk on concrete. If you prefer to walk in grass, you can walk in the grass. You can sit in the sun or you can sit in the shade. You can sit in the bench or you can sit in the chair. And my favorite personal preference, sit in a rocking chair. Can I get an amen? I'm going to pick a rocking chair over a static chair every day of the week. So introduce, or in the case of these shade sails, if you can't create a shade tree, these shade sails can introduce shade, but also this pop of color that can lure the eye into the park. So as you think about Memorial or Gazebo Park going forward, little by little begin to change and enhance it with some of those principles in mind. This is my favorite way that park looks. It's when it's completely occupied, with either people playing in it or choosing to eat their lunch inside of it. The second medium-term recommendation are a unique approach to facade grants. I think a lot of people have heard about traditional facade grants, you know, where you fix up your entire building, you get the work done, and then you ask for reimbursement up to an amount or a percentage. And that strategy has been employed thousands of times. It's very, very successful. The only thing that's hard about that approach is it requires a property owner who's sophisticated, who can afford to hire an architect, who can afford to hire a contractor, and then keep all the receipts. That's the hardest part for me, and then get reimbursed. And so in recent years around America, I've been recommending a simplified approach for a couple of reasons. First, let me explain it. Now, for young people like Blake and Emma, they have no idea what this toy is on the screen. Okay, now for the rest of us, does everybody remember Mr. Potato Head? It was a rather boring toy, if we're really honest. It was fundamentally a big blob of brown plastic until what happened? Until we stuck that big fat nose on there, and then we stuck the lips and what was your favorite element? You know, the big glasses, who knows? Think of our buildings as Mr. Potato Head. And think of the components that make our buildings unique as those elements. It's the signs, it's the awnings, it's the color, it's the doors, it's the windows. Those are the things that take all of those brick buildings out there, and yet, shockingly, they kind of each have their own sort of personality. Well, in this approach to facade grants, you only fund one particular component per year. So by way of example, instead of doing your entire building, in the case of Beaufort, South Carolina, 1 year, they only offered awnings. And so anybody could figure out, do I need a new awning or not? It was a simple proposition. Or in the case of Hartsville, do I need a new sign or not? And what we saw is when you go to a fabricator and you order 30 or 40 awnings at one time, guess what? You get a significant discount. And all of a sudden, when it came to these signs that normally cost, $750 to $1,000, since the city was going to give them $500, they tended to be doing far more ambitious, far more creative signs. So here's the deal. If you're in a town, and Nettleton might fit this category, it may not, with limited funds, I really like this approach because it allows a small amount of money to go farther and benefit more people. Instead of all of your money going into 1 or 2 buildings per year, getting fixed up, all of a sudden now 10 or 15 people get new signs, or 10 or 15 people get new awnings. And to me, I like the approach where more people get to play. In the case, I'm going to feature this one for a specific reason. Conway, South Carolina, the gentleman that owned this building, he was just scared. He bought the building late in life. He didn't know how hard it would be to remove the slip cover. By the way, the slip cover is this white stuff. If you think about your couch, you have your original material, and some people put a slip cover over it to kind of protect it. In the life of our buildings, a slip cover is any material that covers up the original material. Sometimes it's plywood, sometimes it's stucco, in this case it's kind of metal. And he was just fearful. He didn't know how hard it would be to remove it, how much it would cost. So I did a little rendering. I said, I think it's going to look like that. He got so excited, within a month he removed it, and that's the after. Isn't that amazing? Now that's not even the best part of the story. Here's the best part of the story. The city recognized, by the way, that was 15 years ago, it only cost him about $900 to remove it and dispose it. And so they offered $1,000 component grants to remove slip covers, and guess what happened? On their main street, these 5 buildings all removed their slip covers. And it was a radical facelift and transformation. The city of Conway invested $5,000 towards this sort of radical transformation. Really wise and astute use of strategic funds. Another thought is, one of the most difficult things, it's kind of a catch-22. Our downtown buildings are wonderful, but they tend to be narrow and really long, right? And sometimes if you're opening up a small business, you don't need all that square footage. And so you end up strapped and a slave to your mortgage or your lease because you have more square footage than you really want or need or can afford. And so one of the other component grants we recommend sometimes is what we call the demising wall grants, where we chop these larger buildings into smaller. Because trust me, a vintage clothing store, they only need a couple hundred square feet. A gourmet popcorn shop, they only need a couple hundred square feet. And imagine the power if now we had multiple, think about it like the new take on a business incubator, okay? But they can test the market for their business with a far less startup cost and overhead. And if it works, then they can graduate into their own entire space. And last but not least, and this has become relevant when we talk about the alley in a minute, is in Searcy, Arkansas, the component they offered were rear of building enhancements. Does anybody think any rears of buildings in Nettleton need to be enhanced? Yeah, and so that could be a really thoughtful component approach in Nettleton. Now the next 5 buildings, Holly and I joined forces, and we rendered some of your downtown buildings to show the impact that these kind of facade grants and design enhancements could make. And first of all, I just want to really appreciate JJ and Rosa for allowing me to work on your buildings, and Eric, not Eric, but Zach and Jessica in a minute. And as I've told them, and I'll tell you all, they don't have to panic, and y'all don't have to panic for them, because by the way, they haven't seen this. They're very, very trusting people. But if we don't dial it in just right, it's okay, because we're going to keep tweaking it until we get it just right. But these are one building with 2 storefronts that are housing their future businesses. I'll let you describe it later to them if you want to. But if I remember right, on the left is called Simple Style, and I apologize, it's a little dark, but we have it in the windows as well. It's called the Simple Style Hair Experience. And what we've basically done is we have gone back in and replaced the transom glass with either true or replication leaded glass pattern windows, because the transom just allows this really nice quality of light to come in over the canopy, whereas the canopy provides shade and shelter for the person entering the door or walking on the sidewalk. If we go back and forth a couple of times, that's where that would have been historically. I like the fact on this one is to do the canopies, just because I just think it lends a little bit more of a contemporary edge, and it seems like your businesses are sort of geared in that fashion. I love you're going to find out in all three of their storefronts, 2 buildings, 3 storefronts, there's this simplicity in their brand. And I think that's a really good approach, because these buildings have enough character in them that they just need a very, very light touch. And it's amazing if you just do a little bit of pop of color with the planters, it can save you a lot of money and you having to do it on the building itself. Gooseneck lights up here. By the way, these are sort of statuary metal lines, or individual metal, so they'll cast a really nice shadow. And then you have the gooseneck light above it. So at night you're going to get this really sort of nice dramatic wash of light that kind of creates a rhythm. And then thankfully you already have a projecting sign that can hang 90 degrees. And so on one side of the sign you can do the one business, on the other side you can do the other side. I've kind of illustrated it, although you're looking straight and you can't see it, but if I was in your shoes, a brushed stainless steel sign would be really kind of cool and edgy. This is probably my favorite one of the 3 you own. This is going to become a simple event center, and understandably, for sake of cost, they wanted to keep the stucco for now. What I would encourage, as you can see, is just to get a more smoother texture stucco instead of quite it being as rough as it is. But because it's going to be an event center, I really like the approach of taking is let's create sort of a neutral backdrop. What we want to celebrate is what people are wearing and what they're doing in the space, and not let the space kind of dictate it, kind of like the art museum approach. And so here you can see, taking a very simple approach where the building itself remains white, everything else is either a gray or a black, these really classic colors, a font again in the statuary letters, in this case it's more of like an American typewriter font, cast a nice shadow, and again we have the 2 goosenecks. In this case we're going to do a bronze or a black canopy, again just to kind of play up the whole white, gray, black, just very neutral backdrop. And in this case, I would advocate for planters that don't have a lot of color. So again, it's just kind of going with the overall theme. The next building over, Holly took care of that one. Holly did.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so this is the next building. And this has a much shorter depth than any of the other buildings. It's a really cute little space. I think one of the kind of spaces everybody sort of looks at like, what a cute little doll. I mean, isn't it cute? So this was fun thinking about the other 3 buildings that we had already looked at, and thinking about how this one, it already is kind of its own little jewel box. So how might it become even more of that? Again? Yeah. Okay, so color. I think the exterior, it does need a little bit, just like the other one, needs a little bit of pointing in some spots. There's a little bit of repair that needs to happen, but it's already stuccoed, so that's a good opportunity to add some color. It's showing up a little bit more red here than it was on my site, but whatever. And then maybe just taking that existing awning and painting a stripe on it. Doesn't everybody feel like that's just cute as candy? Adding a light fixture adds a lot right underneath that awning. I think you could do some more light above you if you wanted to. And then because it faces the park, maybe some signage like Randy was talking about coming out towards you on the other buildings, but this one could come out to the side. You can kind of see it. It's a little dark there, but we're gaining a different character to this building. Whoever has this, they can do it kind of how they want to. I just kind of wanted to show how color can make a great impact on a space. This is a little planter box, very inexpensive, very easy to maintain, and putting some colorful plants in there. I think it shows to the street we care. And then this is the city just purchased this building right here and this lot, as far as I understand it. And we went inside and looked at it, and it's kind of a blank slate. So there's some services there. I think that with a kind of minimal amount of money, this can be brought up to something that feels sort of comfortable and usable. The city did not tell us how they wanted to use it, so we just kind of decided. In this rendering, we're sort of playing a little bit, so it doesn't have to be this, but we wanted to see what it might look like. So what if this was a youth center? What if this was somewhere for the youth to come and hang out? It's a small enough space that not much can happen in there. So a pool table, you know, there's room for, I didn't mean it like that. An awning added, some of the same graphics being added to the facade that have already been brought in. Looking at adding some lighting underneath the awning, a new front door, some signage to the glass, and then really treating this green space, you know, as some flexible space, like Randy was saying, a place for kids to come and sit on a swing. And it really doesn't have to just be kids. I mean, I'm 43. I would want to sit there. You know, outdoor games, like he was saying, Jenga. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this side of Main Street is your sidewalks slope a good bit, and to walk and step up into that building, you step up like 2 steps. So the reason that we have this kind of light, you can sort of see sort of a kind of aircraft cable, a little more modern looking railing that we added there, was because you could modify that sidewalk to ramp up to the door and then ramp back down, or coordinate with the next building if you needed to. But that just makes this a more accessible building for, you know, all the occupants of your community. And then of course we just took this little sloping green space here and we planted that up. The super fun part is if you have a building here and you have a building here, you can string lights between them. So we heard a lot from the community that when you go downtown at night, it feels dark, which means it feels uncomfortable and unsafe. And if there can be a myriad of light types in the space, you can feel like you can see somebody if someone is somewhere and feel more safe, maybe more people will be downtown at night, even if you're not necessarily going into a business to purchase something, although that would be another advantage to having lighting downtown, is that the merchants may feel more comfortable and needed for them to stay open a little bit later, certain times, just like she was saying, to go with an event, etc. So, I also have another idea for this. So what if, instead of the outside of the building, because you've got kind of multiple facade materials, you got brick on the bottom and then like clapboard on the top, but what if we did a mural on the whole front? So what if it was just kind of artistic, and it could even go down this side that goes down the back. I think that would be a great way for the youth and our community to get involved in a city-owned building and a project and feel ownership of that space, which means that we're usually more likely to take care of it and love it and be there.
Thank you. Did she do good? I love the fact that what you suggested that highly responds to both, you know, the input we heard the other night, and of course, thankfully, this project has funding already associated with it, so it really probably can become a rally fairly sooner than later. The last building we're going to look at one streetscape, but the last building is the Pure Brew coffee station. Where's that? Okay, he's panicking right now. And so I hope I'm not going to say anything you don't know already. And I sincerely hope I don't come within a mile of offending anyone, but the biggest hardship you're currently overcoming is changing the thought that it still looks like a gas station. And so we wanted to propose some solutions, hopefully as affordable as possible, to have the vibe that you have going on the inside kind of be reflected on the outside. Because trust me, on behalf of our team and me personally, I could not have got through the last few days without the caffeine from your place. So, you know, we are sincerely appreciative to you and to Jessica. And so before I go to the next slide, I want to kind of highlight some things in the existing conditions so that when we go to it, you'll understand the logic behind it. Obviously, we have this stone-clad building, and then we have this metal fascia that is at the top of the building, and also it appears in the canopy itself. And so one of the tools we're going to employ when you see on the next is to do a unifying color that both unifies it, but it also kind of tones it down. And because on the inside, you know, Jessica's motif tends to be more kind of like a farmhouse rustic, you know, very warm approach, that told me that the outside colors probably needed to reflect that as well. And so, you know, sort of earth tones and buckskins and coffee color kind of colors are going to be more appropriate as opposed to the blues and the reds, which are kind of cooler. And so what I've decided to do, I'm going to show it in a couple of different stages. In the first stage, we're just going to focus on the architecture itself. My apologies, it's a little bit dark, but this is what we call a wainscot. And a wainscot is just a band of color about 3 feet tall, and it just visually kind of anchors the building to the ground. And you can see I've chosen kind of a brown bronze color that we're also going to paint all the metal up here, which kind of makes a lot of sense for metal to be. And then we're going to have an accent band of blue that aligns with the stripes that were previously in the fascia in the cornice itself. And the blue, of course, is simply drawn from your current logo system. But let's play it up and actually make that logo a little bit more prominent, actually tell people exactly where you are, but still use a font that's reflective of sort of an automobile gas station. But we may want to add your logo and some descriptives in the painted stucco, painted stone itself. So the stone itself will be painted sort of this sort of buff color. We're going to replace all of the previous emblems, you know, from the gas station with your brand logo, and that way everything that you see in terms of branding reflects back to the coffee shop as opposed to the gas station. Now, what's really going to cause this to function like a gas station, coffee shop, is to do the kinds of things that you're already doing. You're already gathering people. It's their third place. And so back here, it's hard to see from where you are, but it describes what you have to offer: coffee, pastries, good times, and all of those things. And then creating some of those vibrancy minis in your very place, because you've got this great canopy. It's conducive to outdoor dining. It's conducive to some of those interactive games. And as a result, I think we can transform it into something that looks a lot more like a coffee shop as opposed to the gas station. But again, to you and Jessica, if you want me to tweak some of this, we have to work with you going forward. The other midterm recommendation is to take a look. If you were with us throughout the week, then when we talked about streetscapes, I always told you that the most important places in the life of your downtown are intersections. Especially those that either have stop signs or signals, because they are the pause points for every person who traverses through your town, whether they're in an automobile or they're on foot. And so because what we heard from you over and over and over again, how do we get people to stop? How do we get people to stop? How do we slow them down? Well, make sure when you do cause them to pause, that they're looking at something stinking awesome, right? So you pique their interest about what else might be populated throughout the community itself. Again, Shane, I'm not a landscape architect, but I'm smart enough and I've hung around enough places to know that in my humble estimation, there are 4 characteristics that make for a very successful streetscape. The canopy created by shade trees, corners, because those are the pause points, crosswalks, because it helps us safely navigate the downtown, because downtowns were made for the pedestrian, not for the automobile. And then the kind of creature comforts that make it enjoyable: shade, comfortable walking spaces, places to sit, places to dispose our trash. The picture that it's superimposed on is a little humble intersection in Mount Holly, North Carolina. Isn't it amazing to me, because they did every one of those things that I just described, that doesn't look like a road to me, it almost looks like a little place, right? And so that's the technique that we want to employ in downtown Nettleton. To me, if I was in your shoes, this is the first intersection I'd focus on. Then after that, I'd focus on the intersection by Pureview Road, and then I'd focus on the intersection up by the railroad track. And so it just went ahead on me. So here's your existing conditions, and in the proposed conditions, Bank Core already has kind of this island right here. And so we're going to extend that island with some more low landscaping and flowers, and we're gonna have this singular trailblazer sign that says Historic Downtown this way, City Hall straight ahead. We're going to introduce these crosswalks, and the amazing thing about that introduction of color and texture is that it's going to slow the motors down because of the tactile experience of driving over that. The nice stylized inn that Jennifer and Kim came up with, we're going to place that and paint it and stain it in the middle of the intersection, because now I think people have a reason to look to the left. And so we have a piece of public art. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's a stylized dandelion. And what we want to do is we want to point an arrow down that way, and we want to give them something to look at and just drop these breadcrumbs and lure people down Young Street where we want them to go. Now, what's really missing from this photograph is trees. And as I alluded to, the canopy created by shade trees is really important, but we have a ton of overhead lines. So in phase one, I'm going to assume that you will not be able to remove any of these lines. And if that's the case, then I would suggest kind of a columnar tree that's actually on the property owner's side of the utilities. In other words, we don't even try to mess with them. But it's amazing, even just that insertion of that kind of columnar tree makes a big difference. And over here we can plant like a cypress or something that's not going to get high enough to get up into the wires. And it's amazing to me just how much that softens it already. Now, in our ideal world, we would know somebody that's high up that deals with utilities, whose last name rhymes with Elvis Presley's name, that might have some sway with utilities. But because I just want to show you what can happen if some utility lines can come down. Now, I'm realistic enough to know that you probably will never get them all done. So all I'm going to show is the impact of just the ones on the left going either below ground or just being relocated to the right side of the street. Because if you can do that, then you can now introduce legitimate shade trees that this downtown probably would have already had. Now, you need to work with Extension to find the best time to plant a shade tree. Does everybody know when that is? 50 years ago. And so you want to kind of create this. Now, in my estimation, it's almost kind of shocking because it looks like a place. And if you compare where we started, see what I mean? It's just radically different. And so hopefully if you just employ some of these strategies little by little over time, you're going to create that intentional pause point that draws some attention to your downtown. Last but not least, super quickly, your long-term recommendations. There's just two. As a part of the COG, you will need some design standards. And I just want to advocate for an approach of those design standards to be illustrative and candid. I'm a property owner, I get it. No one likes people to tell you what you can and can't do with the property. And so these take the approach of saying hundreds of thousands of things that you can do with your property. And using photographs to illustrate these will be appropriate treatments to your materials, appropriate doors, appropriate windows, appropriate awnings, appropriate signs, appropriate balconies. We're just going to change that conversation to what you can do in your buildings. And last but not least, we heard a lot of conversation about the alley. Everybody repeat after me. You don't have to repeat after me, but please let this be a long-term recommendation. You do not need to try to bite off this animal anytime soon. You need to focus on the buildings on the face Main Street for this. In the short term, though, there are some things that you can do to enhance it. Namely, what we would recommend is trying to create a situation where you stop the eye as soon as possible down Short Avenue. The most obvious thing is remove all those shrubs, paint the backs of the buildings, clean it up. But if you just paved this area and introduced a little bit of parking and some food truck opportunities and a tree screen, you're just going to stop the eye from looking all the way down in the short term. In the medium term, we talked about building component grants to do rears of buildings. This was an entire row of buildings that faced our town green, and they were very unsightly. And so we just did two things. Number one is we picked a series of autumnal colors. They're all coordinated. We just painted each different storefront one of those autumnal colors so they would all go together. And then we just simply did this simple 4x4 post with 1x2 strips, and it just screened all of that stuff that exists on the back of our buildings. Our Herbie Kirby's, our weatherheads, and all that stuff. And they each had a comment cover, and so you can see it just kind of cleaned up all of the rears of those buildings. In the long term, I alluded to this gentleman by the name of Andy Cowback. Andy is a landscape architect from Maine who's been on our team for over 20 years. And he graciously developed overnight from his home in Maine a plan for the alley. Again, is this short term or medium term or long term? And all the people said long. But eventually, what he has done, he showed how this can be redeveloped to function as both a street and a parking lot, where you achieve far more parking than before, but you've taken the visual edge off of it and created a space that can even be duplicated as an event space. We're going to zoom in. This is the upper half up by the liquor store, and this is the bottom half down near Main Street. And you can see how he's just created booths and landscape islands so that these parking spaces can also accommodate tents and vendor stations, and even these sort of dining opportunities when they front or back up to a restaurant venue. And whereas up in the front, again, stopping the eye with some sort of treatment that sort of creates a gateway entrance into this alley or this new street. And by virtue of stringing these string lights, I think the ambiance created at night could make for a very attractive appearance. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Thomas to wrap things up tonight. And again, on behalf of the team, I want to personally say thank you for your attention tonight.
All right. Lots of really good ideas. We are at the end of our recommendations for tonight. We've got 2 microphones. This one's for y'all, and this one's to record our audio, because it is our intention to be able to share tonight's presentation with our conversation and put it on YouTube so that y'all can share it with folks that may have wanted to be here tonight, but for one reason or another couldn't make it. So we'll be making sure that the Main Street organization has that to share. Mentioned the YouTube video, so that's what these microphones, we've been swapping them all night. That's what that's for. In about 6 to 8 weeks, our team is going to go back and produce a nice final report. It's going to be a PDF document that the Main Street organization will have. It's the recommendations that you've heard tonight, plus kind of some additional information that helps support that. There will be some appendices and some follow-up things that Rachel alluded to, further analysis that our team will be doing. Also, one of the things that our organization, Mississippi Main Street, does with all of our Main Street programs, and we've got 45 or 50 of them across the state, we provide ongoing technical assistance to our programs. And so Jennifer and Jeannie and I, or some combination of the 3, will be coming back to meet with Dana and the board of directors to provide what we call an implementation workshop. We don't want to just dump this in your lap and say, all right, good luck, see you next time. We're going to step by step work with the organization to help develop strategies to implement these things that we've talked about tonight. And that is something that is ongoing, right? We continue to support our Main Street organizations. That's the fun part of our job, honestly. And so what we would ask, and our team will be available up front for a little while, if y'all have any specific questions or want to come and make any comments to us, please come find us tonight. We'll be happy to share our business cards with you, give you our contact information. But now that y'all have a snapshot, excuse me, of the things that are in Nettleton's future, we want you to be a part of that. And I mentioned this at the very beginning. On the wall to the right of the door on your way out tonight, and I know Dana and her volunteers have markers for you. Please, if you're interested in being a part of this momentum and this excitement, print your name clearly enough for Dana to know who you are on the board underneath the category that is most of interest to you before you leave tonight. It's so important, as we mentioned. All of these things don't just happen magically. There's no magic wand. It is going to take all of you in this room working together incrementally over time to make these things happen. So with that, and on behalf of Mississippi Main Street, I want to thank you all for being so amazing to work with and giving us kind of really, just this great opportunity to share with y'all this vision for Nettleton. So with that, we'll say good night. Thank you all.